Hey everybody, today is Wednesday, September 23rd, and I'm going to take you through what we're doing in history class today. First, I reviewed the pop quizzes from Monday. If you have been home and you haven't been to class on Monday, you need to take that pop quiz. I entered zeros as of this morning for all of the missing work from kids who are absent, so you've got to do the work to earn the grade. Secondly, I reviewed the Fort Loudoun material, also from Monday. You did some research on a Tennessee history website on the history of Fort Loudoun. So make sure that is completed and submitted as well. That's all testable material for our next unit test, so keep it organized and somewhere safe. If you would like a key or for me to send you correct answers, or if you have a question, just message me and I'll be happy to get with you. And then the class is going to take notes on mercantilism and the Navigation Acts. As you can see, this presentation also includes a story about a guy named Peter Zenger, but we are going to keep that until tomorrow, Thursday. So let's get started. Mercantilism and the Navigation Acts are part of an economic philosophy for Britain. Economics are not the easiest thing to understand for 8th graders, so I'm going to use some real-life examples as we do notes today. As you know, colonial America produces a lot of natural resources, cash crops, food things, and raw materials like timber. We're going to use timber or wood as our example for most of our things today. Britain is in a more industrialized country over in Europe. And for today's purposes, Britain is a manufacturer of furniture, among other things. But today we're going to talk about furniture production from England, like tables and chairs. So first, we're going to talk about the concept of mercantilism. I want you to look at this political cartoon with me. You see a woman at a dining table wearing a tiara that says mother country, so clearly kind of indicates a monarchy. And she is looking at 3 maids who on their aprons read the word colony, and each maid is holding a different platter. One reads gold and silver, one reads foodstuffs, and the third raw materials. So mercantilism is this economic philosophy where a country creates colonies to enrich that mother country. And so England practices this, so does Spain, so does France. All European countries, to the best of their ability, have gone about creating colonies to enrich them, to get natural resources, food things, or valuable resources like gold and silver to enrich the mother country. So those colonies were viewed as a source of raw material, but also as a market for goods made in the mother country. Since England is involved in furniture production, but England is a small island, so it's not surprising to hear that England has exhausted all of its old forests that would be good for lumber to make furniture or even shipbuilding, lumber on a larger scale, like building ships. So one of the colonies that England is interested in creating is a colony that can produce lumber or timber. And let's say that the American colony of New York is a great producer of lumber and that packaged wood. So the colony is the source of the lumber, but also the market. So let's pretend that a lumberjack in New York sells England his lumber for $100 per tree. Let's keep it simple. England then takes that lumber for $100 and then manufactures 5 tables out of that lumber. England will sell those tables back to New Yorkers at $100 per table. And so really, England's profiting $400 off the 5 tables they've produced by creating its colony. So England is increasing its wealth. This economic policy of mercantilism is all about creating and maintaining wealth. Wealth is not necessarily measured by how much money you spend, but rather by how much money you make or save. That is how you create wealth. And so England is all about creating colonies that help them increase and maintain wealth. In order to make sure that the New Yorker lumberjack does not trade with anyone but England, England places restrictions on what the colonies could manufacture, whose ships they could use, and most importantly, with whom they could trade. As you can see by the diagram at the top of the screen, colonies were not allowed to trade with one another, but only with the mother country. So that New Yorker lumberjack, he's not allowed to trade with a South Carolina manufacturer or anyone from Massachusetts or anyone in the Bahamas or France or Spain. They are only allowed to trade with England. Little does that New Yorker lumberjack realize that maybe France or Spain would be willing to give him $200 to $300 for his lumber, whereas England is only willing to offer $1. So we don't have that sort of free competition economy of capitalism that we would recognize, but very controlled economics by Britain. Okay, now we have a concept called salutary neglect. Distance and the size of the British Empire makes it difficult for Britain to fully regulate colonial trade. England is very far away from North America. It is also physically very small. So these rules and restrictions they place on colonial America are difficult to enforce. Before 1763, Britain followed a policy known as salutary neglect. That's when Britain passed a law regulating colonial trade, knowingly that they could not enforce that law. Here's a real world example for you. Let's pretend you guys know that in school, if you need to go out of the classroom, like to the bathroom or something, you're supposed to fill out your agenda, and then your teacher is supposed to sign it. That's the rule. But we all know that, especially in today's day and age, teachers don't necessarily always make you do that. And really, when was the last time someone asked to see your agenda on the way to the bathroom? Probably never in your Grassland career. So in a way, in real life, we still practice salutary neglect, where we purposefully ignore some rules because they're unnecessary. However, you would expect Grassland to tighten up on their agenda signing rules if, let's say, there's like vandalism that happens in the bathroom. Then the administration gets involved, they check the cameras, they want to know which students were out of class when. And after that event passes, you probably wouldn't be surprised if teachers kind of cracked down on that rule of signing your agenda and giving you permission to leave class to use the bathroom. So similarly, Britain is ignoring some of their trade policies. During this period of about 100 years of salutary neglect, Britain does not enforce its trade laws, which means the colonies have greater autonomy. The New York lumberjack is trading to potentially Canada or another American colony or the British West Indies instead of the Crown, because he is able to sell his lumber for the person who's willing to give him the most money. Salutary neglect. Now, salutary neglect is about to come to an end. The French and Indian War was expensive for Britain. You have to pay to hire men to be soldiers. You have to train them, clothe them, feed them, transport them all over the world to fight. So when the war ended, the British government discovers a lot of debt. Therefore, it attempts to enforce many of its trade laws as a way to help the British economy and increase revenue or wealth. Some of those laws are called the Navigation Acts. The Navigation Acts are examples of royal attempts to control colonial trade. The Navigation Acts specifically banned the American colonies from trading with any nation except Britain. So now all of the colonies are forced to only trade with England. As you can see by the cartoon, England holds a paper saying tax. Some of those ships have British flags, some of those ships have different flags. And you can tell by the word bubbles that England is attempting to control trade. For example, here it says send that tobacco to England. So taking the American resources directly there. Up here it says don't export any hats, woolens, or irons, since these things are already made in England. So don't export them to anyone else. Let England have the exclusive control of it. Down further south it says you can't export anything except in English colonial ships. So don't try to trade with anybody else. Here in the open water, this British ship is telling some foreign ship to take that cargo to England to be taxed before you landed in the colonies. So England, even if the colonies were able to accept, let's say, African goods, that cargo had to be taxed in England before it was sent here. So England makes the money, and the colonists still get the goods, but a more expensive price. All of these laws exist to increase the wealth of England at the cost of the colonies. Smuggling becomes really common in the colonies, especially New England. New England has the majority of our port cities like Boston and New York. British customs officials often supplemented their income with bribe money from colonial smugglers. So, a British customs official is an American colonial whose job it is to work at a port. And when ships come in, he checks their logs to see what they're supposed to be carrying. He makes sure that the cargo on board the ship matches what's in the log, that it's been stamped and taxed and paid for appropriately, and then it can be unloaded in the port to the merchants who sell it to the people. Well, those customs officials may be approached by a captain saying, my first and second level cargoes are legit, but in my third level cargo, I've brought in some sugar from the West Indies. It hasn't been taxed. But if you accept some of this sugar and a few silvers, would you be willing to overlook it? And those customs officials did that all the time. It would allow them to earn money and maintain their comfortable lifestyle here in America. They didn't have this sort of national allegiance to the British crown. Again, we're talking about people who've never been to England or lived in England. We're like second and third generation American-born citizens now. And they're technically British nationals, but they don't have they're having less and less allegiance to the crown. Even when smugglers were caught, they were often freed by sympathetic American juries. So there are ways to go about maintaining colonial autonomy, even when salutary neglect comes to an end. All right, so the next part is John Peter Zenger, which we will be starting on tomorrow. I'm going to let you go. Hopefully you finished your notes for the day. Please check your grades in Schoology and Skyward. If you're missing something from me, go ahead and turn it in. And message me if you need anything. See you soon.